Maybe at the start, Mr. Kapama, if you can just kindly expand on that issue of one center of power, two center of power, the effect it has or the impact it has within the party.
A concept that is entirely new, both especially to the state of Namibia, which has come into existence in 1990, and also to SWAPO per se. Now, of course, if you look into the history of SWAPO, people will tell you that Sam Nyoma was the president of SWAPO, and Nathaniel Mahulili was the acting president inside the country. So they are referring to this as that it's not a new development. It has always been there. But I think one cannot equate the political conditions of the liberation struggle, whereby many of our people could not stay inside the country for their own safety. Some were forced out of the country under different conditions. And the fact that even when the struggle continued from outside, there was a need for it to continue inside. So the liberation struggle conditions, the colonial political environment inside the country necessitated that. So the key question is that are we saying there is currently something very highly abnormal in the political environment, in the party politics of the party and the government, to the extent that you necessitate an arrangement whereby you have two centers of power. I think if we are convinced, or those who are advocating for two centers of power, if there is that abnormality, then we need to normalize the situation rather than advocating for the sustenance of an abnormal condition through abnormal proposals. So my own personal view as a person is that those who are advocating for two centers of power, they should just have be bold enough and say there is something wrong, and that wrongness need to be addressed. They should campaign and take power in the party and remove the president so that we can revert to a normal condition rather than trying to naturalize an abnormality. So, and I think the other challenge with the so-called two centers of power proposal is the Namibian constitution makes provision for an executive president, a president that would be able to exercise state power fully. If we go for the so-called two centers of power, then we are creating a paralysis in the sense that we will have a paralyzed president that would not be able to fully exercise the executive powers as they are provided for in the Namibian constitution, because he or she would not have the necessary control over the party, and as a result would be weakened. So I think if there is a problem, as I said, let everyone campaign, and the person who won, we move towards giving that person all the powers in order to run the state. Wamba didn't want to have two centers of power. That's why he handed over. I think perhaps looking back, one thing that should have happened when Pohamba stepped down, I think an extraordinary Congress should just have been called immediately to elect an acting president, then perhaps this vacuum wouldn't have been there. I think the proposal of the two centers of power is that one can be told to the kids because it's not sincere. I don't see it working at all. It will create more problems for the state and the party rather than creating a normal condition. And I think also one of the key issues here is that Namibia is facing challenges in quite a number of areas in relation to land compared to what it has faced in the last 25 years, in relation to the state of the economy. So having a president that would be a lame duck would amount to doing a disservice to the country that could do more harm than good. So let those who sees anything wrong come out fully, they campaign, they take power, and we recall the president. Because that to me will work, rather than being sugar-coated with the incoherent notions of so-called two centers of power, because I'm not convinced by that argument at all.
Maybe just to expand still on that point. So, in terms of really splitting this, the state power and the party,
yes.
And perhaps this is also a proposal that comes in an event when we have another party, which is a ruling party, or a head of state who is from a different party. So are we not going to have two centers of power?
No, we would have a ruling. You see, now you are confusing two things. And I think this is the confusion which is in the minds of those who are talking about two centers of power. Why do you have a ruling party? So that the party can run government. So at the party, let us a party leader who will run government. Rather than separating, and the day there is another party in power, or a president from another party, then SWAPO would not be a ruling party. It would be the party in the opposition. So, and they even will not talk of two centers of power. But when you have SWAPO as a ruling party, you want the SWAPO manifesto implemented. You want the SWAPO political program. You want coherence between the party and the government. And you will not have that coherence with two centers of power. What it can create is a lame duck president who would not be able to exercise fully the powers that are in the constitution. So South Africa has done it before. Becky lost an election, he was recalled. If Gengop loses the election, let us not sweet talk and sugarcoat things with empty concepts that will bring us problems. Let us recall Gengop. And whoever wins runs the state from there going forward. But if we feel that is very dangerous to do, let us then stick with Gengop.
Maybe you can just also add on the issue around succession plan that currently are not present within the party configuration of power, and perhaps it also give loophole to some of this proposal to come.
Yes, now I think you see, if you go back to 1998, we were saying we are not ready for succession at state level, and we allowed for a third term. When the third term came to an end, we saw the four-horse race, the three-horse race. Now, when the third term came, the fallout of the third term led to the formation of the Congress of Democrats. After the second term, the third term came to an end. Then we had the three-horse race of three candidates to get one to be nominated as a SWAPO party candidate for the presidential election in 2004. And that led to the creation of the RDP with the current Congress. We have seen a lot of very bitter criticism of among the comrades. One of the key questions is that what would happen, definitely what would happen at the end of the Congress is that we'll have somebody as a winner and somebody else as a loser. What would happen at the end of the day? Would they reach out to each other? Would the winner gracefully accept victory and try and pull the party together? Would the loser gracefully accept defeat? Or we are looking at a repeat of what we have seen with COD and RDP? It's one of the key questions. Now, when we talk about succession planning, there are many issues that have been said. Some comrades are arguing or playing the card of seniority and other issues. But the problem is that others are playing now the card of that with Pohamba, he automatically ascended into the role of the party president. From vice president, there was no competition because he was already the state president and so on. But I think our problem is that we leave too many things to chance. We don't define them. We try and define things on the basis of tradition rather than very clearly defined and written and quoted rules. And part of it is why we are finding ourselves in this situation. So yes, succession planning requires very clear rules. But I don't think also we are really engaged in serious succession planning in the sense that given the age of the presidential candidates, given the age of the vice presidential candidates, maybe with the Secretary General there are exceptions, given the age of some of the candidates, even for the Deputy Secretary General. Are we planning for the future? Because succession planning should be future oriented. If you are looking at a very good model of succession planning, then one would have to look at the Chinese model. Many of the people who and in China you won't see such an open race where those that are aspiring go out into the public and they criticize one another to the extent of even dividing the party grassroots. They have a way of dealing and engaging and resolving this at the leadership level. Also based on the Chinese succession planning model, we have also seen that there is a very clear intergenerational succession planning, something that we don't have here. I think part of the challenge and fear of some of our leaders is that there seems to be a breakdown between the different generations, to the extent that one generation fears that if they pass on power to the next generation, there would be continuity, or SWAPO is going to become something else, which perhaps the founders would not be proud or would not be able to identify with. And all those things are pointing back to not very clear succession planning model. SWAPO needs to develop one. All these talks of seniority that currently seniority that because it happened with Kohamba, it has to happen. Since they are not codified, they are empty talks. So one of the challenge, perhaps at this Congress, if it is not already laid, there should be a very clear model of succession that would be debated and become part of the written rules, the constitutions, the policies of the party. I don't think SWAPO has any succession planning strategy in place. From one person of the same generation and also to people in the next generation, I don't see it, it's not there.
Perhaps what could be the reason?
Yes, part of the reasons is that maybe SWAPO has not experienced some of the challenges that it is experiencing now. So, and in many instances, there are those who only learn lessons from experience. Is one. Two, I think also the founding generation, the generation of Tanga, the subsequent generation, somebody was calling it of Napandwe, and so on. Also, partly they are not ready to hand power to the other generations. I don't think they trust them very much. I don't think they believe that the generations that come after them fully understand the politics of the SWAPO party, and I think there is that fear that if they hand over power, they may be making a mistake. So I think it has more to do with lack of trust in the subsequent generations.
Maybe this will round up, Mr. Gadam, if you can just briefly, this statement of the legacy continue.
Yes.
So I want you to unpack that statement in terms of what really entailed in that statement.
Now, you see, legacy does not mean doing what was done in 1904. If you look at the challenges that Namibia is experiencing now, many of them may be completely different from the challenges that Namibia faced at independence. So when we talk of the legacy continuing, we should accept that yes, it's true that SWAPO was a liberation movement. We should accept the fact that SWAPO fought and brought colonialism to its knees. And SWAPO liberated Namibia, yes, it's true. But we are facing challenges where many of our people are hungry, they are naked, they are sleeping in the open sky, they don't have jobs, they are broke, the education system, yes, is free, it is reaching more people, but it's not producing graduates that this country needs in order to turn its economy around. Yes, the enrollment at university has increased. Many of the graduates that are leaving the university are not yet ready, they don't have the necessary support to go and deploy the knowledge and skills they have accumulated through their training in order to change the Namibian economy. So there are those challenges. So when we talk of the legacy continuing, we are not saying that what happened at 1990 should continue happening now, because the challenges are different. In 1990, when we talk of education for all, the emphasis was on quantity, getting the numbers, so that we can say there is a 100% school enrollment rate. But now the challenge that we are facing, we need quality, not only quantity. So if you look at, if I may go back to the example of China again, China has accepted, yes, the legacy continue, but China is very willing to embrace change, new methods of doing things, new ideas to be infused into the system, new leaders to try new methods and ideas. And I don't think Namibia is ready for that. And that's why the Chinese legacy, the legacy of the Chinese Communist Party is taking China forward. But the way we are trying to interpret our legacy continue is that it's bordering to advocating for stagnation. Things have been done this way, that's how they should be done. We have always been thinking this way, that's how we should continue thinking. Even when technology, the global economic structure, our own economic structures are changing, we want to hold on to what we brought in to practice in 1920, in 1990 when we got our independence. And I think that will not take Namibia forward. And that would kill the legacy of SWAPO, because if SWAPO fails to continue to deliver the goods, to solve problems that people are experiencing, then SWAPO is going to become like Kano. It's going to become like UNIP in Zimbabwe, in Zambia. So yes, the legacy continues, but our legacy, in order for it to continue and flourish, it should open up to new ideas. It should open up to even new people, rather than only holding on to those who have liberated the country. Because these are two different struggles.
Maybe just finally, just really your view towards the Congress, SWAPO Congress. So maybe your prediction, your insight in that.
Yes, no, I think we are seeing full fields of candidates nominated for quite a number of different positions. And my message is that may the best candidate win. And being popular may not necessarily be best. With best, I say those that are going to Congress, they should get out of this thing of I'm from this village, therefore I will support the person from my village. I speak this language, I'm going to support the person that speaks my language. I've been associated with this camp, I'm supporting the candidate with this camp. Let's vote those that are going to the Congress. Look carefully among the candidates and say, what is it that confronts Namibia today, and who is the best person to lead the SWAPO party into the future in the different roles. And here also there is a lot of emphasis on the top four, but I think the whole Central Committee needs to be taken into consideration, because you need a critical mass of capacity to take the party forward. So may the best candidate, I'm not saying the popular, I'm saying the best in terms of what the country and the party need for the legacy of the blood of those who bought us our freedom to live on and not to go to waste.
What we have to remember is that before 1990, SWAPO was a liberation movement, and only after independence did they become a political party operating in a democracy that needed to develop their own internal democracy. So the last 27 years have been a journey where they've been evolving the inner party democracy of the ruling party. And I think that's why some people find it quite difficult now, because they think back to the past when Sam Leon was the president and things seem more straightforward then. congresses, there was some competition and disputes, but it wasn't on the level that we've experienced, say, since 2004 onwards. I think SWAPO is doing the right thing by developing its democratic practices, trying to make sure there is competition within the party ranks for key posts within the party, and having properly organised, fair, internal democratic elections for posts. They are doing the right thing. They may have got some of the mechanisms and the way they're doing it not quite functioning as they would like. And maybe after this Congress, the party will sit down and review its rules and its constitution and make sure these kinds of Congresses are run more smoothly. But at the same time, democracy is about competition. You will get rival camps and rival candidates. And for a time, during the campaign period, it's quite messy. There is sometimes anger and misunderstandings. So the fact that we are going through this at the moment is just indicative that we're in the ruling parties in a democratic process. So as I say, I think the party perhaps could try to organise its elections better, but at the same time, this is a positive process. As long as the party can reach a point where it reunites, comes together after the Congress and manages to, everybody falls behind the winning candidates. The danger, I think, with this particular Congress is that it's been quite a bitter and drawn out, long campaigning period, in the sense that people seem to have been campaigning unofficially for quite a long time, and often using the newspapers as well as campaign vehicles. And it's been quite bitter, so there's the need to unite the party after the Congress, but also to avoid further disputes. So there's a need to make sure that the Congress is fair and transparent process so that people accept the result. Do you want me to talk about the one? Yeah. There's the two centres of power. For this Congress, there's been a new sort of concept that's been suggested by some of those opposed to the head of state as the president of the party, which is that there should be two centres of power, not one centre of power, which suggests that the presidency of the party and the possibility of key positions like Secretary General should be with people who are not necessarily full supporters of the president of the country. To be honest, I haven't really heard a strong argument in favour of that from the groups that are against the head of state. Presumably they might think that a different set of personalities in SWAPO headquarters might be better for holding the government to account, for holding the SWAPO officials in the cabinet to account. But I haven't really heard a good argument for that. It would seem to be more a situation that might lead to further disunity and further disputes. And my big concern about this is that the Congress, in a way, is important, as I've said, but it's also a distraction from the main task of the ruling party as government, which is to solve Namibia's burning issues, which are the high level of inequality, poverty, and unemployment. And the longer and more bitter these disputes are around Congress and who should be elected and personality disputes, the more it would seem to sap energy and distract people from the main tasks of government. So it would seem to me that if a complete set of different candidates came into power within the party and were challenging the presidency of the country and the cabinet, that would not be a healthy situation. It would lead to disunity, but it would also hamper the government going forward. Now, the government has, under the mandate of the people, it has an 80% backing at the last election, and the president had 87%. So the people who are much more than just the SWAPO delegates at Congress or the SWAPO membership have voted for 5 years for this government. So this government should be allowed to go on and do its job to the best of its ability. And my concern is that by undermining president and his choices as cabinet, the process and the effectiveness of government will be also undermined. So maybe they will come out clearly now and say why they want these two centres of power, but so far I haven't heard a very strong argument in its favour. It would seem more logical to me to have the president of the party as the head of the party, and then your top administrator, and maybe it doesn't matter which particular camp they come from, as long as they're a unifying figure, should be the Secretary General of the party who deals with the internal administration of the party and the development of the party as a political party, backed up by the Deputy Secretary General. For those positions, it would seem logical to have people who are, on the same wavelength and on the same wavelength as the head of state. And the most obvious way to do that is to have the same personality as president. I don't think it matters that the president of the country would not have much time for day-to-day party matters. That's not his job. His job is to govern the country. As long as he has a Secretary General who he can trust and rely on to make sure the party is operating properly. I suppose the more interesting position that's now going to be contested at this election is the vice presidency position, because although it's not set down in stone, it has become a tradition that the person in the vice presidency of the party is seen as a future successor to whenever the president of the country in place is no longer in power. They would be the obvious next candidate. So that will obviously be hotly contested, not just because it's an important position within the party, but because it seems to set the winner up for possibly being SWAPO's future presidential candidate at a future election. So that one obviously is slightly outside the issues I've talked about, but in general, I don't see a strong argument for two centres of power, unless, in the few weeks we have now to Congress, somebody can come up with a reason why that would actually be an effective way of running the party, but also an effective way of running the country.
Maybe one argument you would pick up from those who are proposing for two centres of power, maybe from yourself as a democratic, because somebody who promote this ideal of democracy. Don't you think maybe there is an argument that needs to be pursued in terms of not consolidating all the power in one person, but have a script there? How is that reflected when you see it in a democratic context?
Yeah, well, we have to remember that SWAPO is a political party, so in the constitution of the country, it doesn't mention the SWAPO presidency or the SWAPO politburo. What the constitution of the country sets up is a presidency and an executive centred in the president and the cabinet. And the constitution goes into some detail with this Bill of Rights and different bodies like the Ombudsman and the Anti-Corruption Commission, setting out the independent judiciary. So we try to make sure that there are checks and balances. So I think the way the state is set up with the constitution is it tries to deal with those issues of making sure the president does not have unlimited power and there are checks and balances on him, and he has to work through the Parliament, the National Assembly, the National Council. He can't be a dictator according to our constitution. So thus far, I don't think we've had a big issue with the head of state having too much power. There are maybe limitations, not limitations, but there are factors that come out of the fact that SWAPO is a very dominant ruling party that wins elections with large majorities, which puts it in a very strong position. But I do think that the Constitution tries to rein in any possible abuse of power by the head of state. So I'm not sure that that's the function of the party, because the party, most parties around the world, if they are successful, have to be unified. You cannot continue going forward and keep winning elections if you have, there are divisions, but very deep-seated divisions that are not solved by things like congresses and meetings. So it just seems to me that there isn't a very strong argument for another centre of power. The other thing I think there may be an argument for the party being more assertive and being different, on a different sort of wavelength to the presidency, if it was felt that the presidency is not keeping to SWAPO policies as agreed, SWAPO targets and aims as set out, but the SWAPO manifesto from 2014 has been adopted by government. As far from my reading, it does seem to inform the key development plans of government like Harambe and NDP 5. So I don't see that there's a division between what the party has said it wants to do as a ruling party and what the government programs are. There are some differences, but they're not wildly different. If the president had veered off on a completely different track and was doing things that weren't being talked about prior to the 2014 election and weren't in the manifesto, then we could perhaps say that on a policy grounds, on ideological grounds, there might be a need for the party to assert itself and bring itself back to what might be its core values. I've heard mention of, some of the people who are standing against the president and his candidates saying we need to return to our traditions, our core values. I haven't really heard that explained in great detail, because I don't think these candidates are actually about policies and ideologies. They're more about personalities and the ambition for power and influence and to have positions. And that was what seems to be happening. So all the members of the party we thought had been retired, or we thought was kind of on the way out of party politics, are now back looking for positions again. And I think it's just that it's hard for SWAPO career politicians who have always been in the SWAPO patronage network to actually operate outside that network. So the only thing I think I have to get back in, I have to secure a prominent senior place for myself. That seems to be the argument from some of those candidates, but I don't see, as I say, huge. So none of these candidates, as far as I know, have said government is doing the wrong thing with the Harambe plan, they're doing the wrong thing with the targets of NDP 5. And these documents were largely based on consultation anyway, so it would be hard for them to argue that. So, I think we wait to see what happens now. There will be an intense period of campaigning prior to the Congress. Maybe the positions of candidates and why they are so adamant that they don't think it's suitable for the president and his candidates, President Gangovin's candidates, to have dominance within the ruling party in these positions is a good thing. But I can maybe, say what I think is going to happen. I think that elections often favour incumbents. Incumbents, the people in the positions, have power. Now, there is no incumbent president. Realistically, if you look at the SWAPO constitution, President Gangov was only ever the acting president. But I think that still gives him a strong position, starting position. And I would expect him to win that presidential vote. But I think he might have to then deal with a mixed picture in the other positions. So it's not clear to me that his chosen candidate, Sophia Shiningbo, will necessarily win. It will be a close contest, I think, for the Secretary General position. Tundu Nandi Ndaitwah is probably the favourite for the VP, but Pendukeni Budoitano is also a very strong candidate, so it's not absolutely clear what will happen there. And similarly, the Deputy Secretary General, probably if you just looked at paper and experience and skills, we have a very strong candidate in Martha Tila Nanjebo, because she has a lot of outside experience of being a successful business person. So she would be a strong candidate there. So it seems to me that also there might be a feeling that if the president gets the presidency, he needs to incorporate younger people in these positions. It can't always be the old guard. And so that might favour people like Martha Tila Nanjebo and Arma Samikrio for the Secretary General position. So although I'm not making exact predictions, I think what might happen is we have a mixed result, whereby people from different camps are occupying different positions, and the makeup of the Central Committee too will also be from camps, not from one dominant camp. And that might be difficult if it's not managed properly, but it could also be good if people can unify, come together, and work together after the Congress. So a lot depends now on trying to reduce the level of bitterness and make sure the campaign is fair and transparent, and then everybody will accept the results.
Maybe just finally, briefly, this issue of career in politics, how best one can curb this, considering that sometimes some of these comrades, they were already in economic service, now they want to come back through SWAPO party. How one can curb that? Is it because of the absence of succession plan maybe within SWAPO?
Yes, I think the fact that a lot of SWAPO politicians in general seem to find it difficult to retire. We've had a few notable examples of people like Liberty Matila who did retire, and I think is held in high respect because of that. But a lot of other politicians seem to hang on, and I think it's a generational issue. I think the liberation struggle generation have totally based their lives and dedicated their lives to SWAPO, and therefore they don't really have other strands. They don't have a successful business or a successful farm or something else they could want to do in retirement. They don't have other public positions they seem to be able to take up outside the ruling party, and therefore they only see the only way they can continue to have a position, have some influence, and also probably gain a reasonable salary is to stay on within the party. But the danger of that is it's frustrating a lot of younger people within the ruling party. There isn't space for them to move into prominent positions. It's a generational thing that probably will change now, because the next generation or the generation after that will be a different type of politician who probably have got serious educational qualifications. They may have had working experience in business or in other sectors of the economy, and then they come into politics. So, they would always, if they lose their seat after 5 or 10 years, or they don't have a position, they have an alternative to go to. They have another career or a backup plan. So I don't know what can be done about it at the moment, apart from trying to encourage older people to make space for younger people. But I think it probably will be solved in terms of the generational progress that eventually. We just have to hope that young people haven't become totally disassociated and uninterested in politics and political issues by what's happening at the moment. By the time they get the chance to get into serious senior political